And welcome to our discussion of fantasy without elves, or urban fantasy. My name is Jason Henderson. I'm one of two publishers at Castlebridge Media, myself and my partner Inchur Yo, who's the creator of our whole look and feel and all of our covers and much of our editing. We have been running Castlebridge Media, which is an indie publisher in Colorado, for several years, and we're getting together today because we're launching a new book from one of our panelists, The Tunnels of Buddha by Don Sawyer, which is the second book in a series that he's called Soulcatcher. But rather than just talk about one book, I really always get a lot out of hearing from different authors talking about topics. So we have the panel today. We're talking about urban fantasy, what it is, what it takes, and what goes into publishing. So let me talk a little bit about our panelists today. So with us, we start with Tricia Copeland. Hello, Tricia. Tricia has been acknowledged as an award winner in two separate book categories for the 2024 Global Book Awards. And I think the book that you were talking about today, well, there's two kind of simultaneously, To Be a Fae Queen and Azreya, Aztec Priestess. Tell us a little, if I haven't actually taken away everything that you would have said, tell us a little bit about yourself, Tricia.
Right. So I write young adult fantasy as well as new adult closed door romance, but we're talking about fantasy today. So I'm wearing that hat and my fairy, not elf shirt. I don't know if you can see it. My name might be covering it. But my Realm Chronicles series is about a young queen fairy who is crowned queen at age 17, so has a lot to prove.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Also with us is Mark Morton, noted Canadian nonfiction author, longtime CBC columnist, and he has a debut novel with the Headmasters from Shadowpaw Press. But as we mentioned, deep nonfiction experience, including one nominated for the Julia Child Award, which is Covered Love. Welcome, Mark. What do you want to tell us about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Well, I'm really happy to be here. I feel it's sort of weird for me because the book that just came out, I just got it from the publisher today in the mail, is a book, it's the first book that I wrote 30 years ago, but it's been republished. This is the third edition, and it's nonfiction. And it's sort of very analytic. It's about the origins of food words, the origins and histories of food words, etymologies, in other words. And yet I still have in my head the young adult dystopian novel that I published last year. So they're both rattling around in competition in my head. So maybe I'll talk about them in relation to each other once we get going.
I think it's a great idea. And likewise, Tricia, I want to talk about the demands of genre and switching genres and what the heck is new adult, because I love it, but I think it's fun to hear that discussion of nascent genres. And I mean, it's not so nascent, it's been at 10 years, but still, you know, I love those changes. We also have Don Sawyer. So Don, as we mentioned, your new book, The Tunnels of Buddha, launches today, but you've written 12 books in a bunch of different genres, two Canadian bestsellers. Tell us a little bit about yourself and coming into this world of fantasy.
Yeah, thanks very much. I just want to say too that Castlebridge has been great to work with, and the book, the two books that are out. The first one was called The Burning Gem, and then this one, The Tunnels of Buddha, was originally written as one enormous single novel, and as you can imagine, any publisher with any sense that we're not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. So I ended up breaking it up into two books, and fortunately, Jason and Inchur saw the potential there. And so we've had a really great relationship over the last year, almost to the day we had the book launch for The Burning Gem. But as far as me, well, I mean, I've been around a while, so that kind of gives me a bit, some time to draw on. And I consider myself to be an educator who writes. And so rather than a writer who is primarily an author. and it's a good thing too, because I certainly would have starved to death on whatever I made from my writing. But I've had a wonderful career, really varied career. I've, worked in West Africa in creating development programs for grassroots community workers. I've worked in Jamaica. I've worked in Aboriginal communities in Canada. And so all of that sort of diversity, literally and figuratively, sort of filters into my books. And so my books go all the way from chapter books for you know grade 4 and 5 kids up through nonfiction for adults. In this particular case, chronicling our first experiences teaching in a rural Newfoundland outport way back in the 70s. And that book was called Tomorrow is School, and I'm Sick to the Heart Thinking About It, which was left in a note that one of the kids used to come up to our house because they were bored and had nothing else to do. And we actually had a dartboard. And Jan used to cook brownies, big brownies. So anyway, as he was leaving that night, he wrote, "Tomorrow is school, and I'm sick to the heart thinking about it." And that just really stuck with me.
It's a
So
great
that
title. It
became,
is.
isn't that great? I mean, you can't. So anyway, so yeah, that's me. I worked in at the college level. I operated a teacher training program for First Nations adults out of Simon Fraser. At the end of my career, I was working for Okanagan University College, as I said, right at the end, working in West Africa. We had something called the West Africa Rural Development Center, which was based in the Gambia, but I was also working in Ghana. So it's been a really fun run. And now that I'm retired, it gives me more time to focus on the writing, which may or may not be a good thing. I don't know. It's just I'm working on the third book, and it's driving me nuts. But anyway, we'll let that one go for now.
We'll get into process actually, because I
Yes.
definitely want to ask all of you about your process of writing, because I find it endlessly fascinating. Mickey, I'm so glad that you're here on this panel. You're the founder of Creative Edge Publicity. You've worked with uh, multiple award-winning authors in New York Times and USA Today, best-selling authors, and you deal in the everyday foot to the pavement world of publicity, and so you know a lot about the industry and publishing and what it takes. And I think it's really useful. And we're going to talk, especially in the process piece, just about what authors can expect, because I'm hoping that somebody listening to this in the audio podcast version that we'll do, or the video YouTube version, they'll be thinking about just what it is today in 2025 to publicize a book, because I know it's changed since to give the background on me. I started as a novelist and published my first book. I was writing Incredible Hulk novels like back in the early 90s, and fantasy and stuff like fantasy with elves. And
Big
and
L.
and it's a different, yeah, big F, the true fantasy. It's a different world today than it was when I started. Back then, if you were submitting a book, you literally sent a ream of paper in an envelope to some publisher in New York, and you waited to hear back 3 or 4 months later. Whereas now you send them an email and wait to hear 3 or 4 months later, if you're lucky. Um,
Yeah.
but at least you're not spending so much cash on just postage. All right. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, you've all got fantasies that don't completely fit into, and you can say, Jason, I think your premise is flawed. I think the fantasy, when people hear about it, you're at a party, you're at a barbecue, and you say, "Oh, I write fantasies," and somebody pictures Tolkien. They picture elves and wizards and what have you, and some of those elements probably survive into all the other fantasies. In urban fantasy, but some don't. And you say, "Well, I write urban fantasy," and they might think, if they're of a certain age, "Oh, like Shadowrun, cyberpunk and stuff like that, cyberpunk with magic." But any of you can jump in as you want. But if you get too rowdy, I'll call on you one at a time. But how do you explain this genre to people? And I guess the next piece of it, and then how do you make them interested in it? But hopefully your explanation is interesting, so they go, "Oh, okay, that makes sense. I'll look for that." But how do you explain this genre to people? And anyone?
I mean,
Tricia, why don't you? Oh, Don, go ahead. You
yeah,
were
okay. I
saying
mean, I think it's ironically a very old genre and a very new one. I mean, you look at 1984 or even Gulliver's Travels. I mean, those were those were allegories. They had an element of reality to them. This
Faust. When you come to that, I mean,
Yeah,
basically
well,
anything with
let's go
magic.
all the
Yeah.
way back. Well, I mean, we can go back farther than that in the Greek myths. In fact, in this current book, The Tunnels of Buddha, I actually had the audacity to draw a bit on the Persephone myth. So, I mean, we can see that these elements are as old as the hills, as they say. But I think that recently it's become a more kind of formalized and recognized genre as such. And I think maybe it's a reflection on our preoccupation with our current situation. I mean, to me, the idea of urban fantasy is the juxtaposition of the magical and the literal and the immediate. And that's what I think makes it so fascinating. I mean, literally worlds underneath our feet. And one of my very favorite examples of course, is the Night Circus, which is just this magnificent book
Mm.
that takes us sets up camp one night and everybody goes, and the next morning it disappears. And it's real. It has the sense of reality, but the sense of magic at the same time. And I think that's what you're trying to embrace when you write this. And I found it really exciting, and even research like um, I'm using a lot of magic, but geez, we can't understand what's going on right now. I have no idea about the magnetic impulses that are coming through this and then being transmitted instantaneously. I mean, that's pretty magical in itself. So I think that we're all sort of faced with that magic that we don't understand, and so there's that immediacy. Yeah, we're living in a magical world, and let's just take the wraps off and really look at it.
Mm.
And I guess that's to me it's an as I say also an opportunity to write allegorically because it's not out of it's not on some far off planet. Although Ursula Le Guin can do that and make wonderful commentaries on Earth, but that's another story. She used to talk about she didn't write science fiction; she wrote social science fiction. And
Hmm.
I thought that was really interesting, and I think I can certainly relate to that. But in any event, I think that idea of worlds underneath our feet, and some of I must say, some of the urban fiction I'm not that crazy about, just takes sort of dragons and dungeons and swords and superimposes them over Chicago, right? But there's nothing about the interaction that I think really to me anyway, says, "Oh wow, it's not like these sort of awkward dragons that walk into Grant Park." I mean, no, this is like serious interaction between the real and the magical, right in our faces. And when I was doing research on for the first book, well, both of them for that matter, and I started looking into the subway system in New York. I mean, I want to get the reality here. I want to try to, there is a reality there. And much to my amazement, I found out that there really was an abandoned subway system. It was abandoned in about 1880. And so when I created this kind of utopian community underneath the subway system, there it was, just waiting for me. So it's fun, it's exciting. Like all of the stuff I do in terms, although I don't understand it, but wave technology and all this sort of thing, it is magic. And I mean, this is the kind of thing that Tesla was working with, back in the mid 1800s. And so, it's a magic. There's magic out there, and it's oftentimes not as far away as we think it is.
That's wonderful. And by the way, the hidden subway tunnel, that's actually one of my favorite elements to your series is how they're occupying some of these old constructs.
Yeah.
I love that. Um, Going in alphabetical order, Tricia, somebody says to you, "What the heck is that?" I mean, how do you grapple with this question of what the genre is?
I think the main two elements for me would be that it's urban, so it's set in a city setting, a population area, and probably, I mean, this is probably not a hard and fast rule, but contemporary.
Mm.
Like it's in our present time, most likely. And like Don said, there are a lot of urban, and I might even call those urban fantasies that he said he didn't like the quintessential urban fantasies of just, yeah, dragons and monsters are just in New York City, and a lot of them have elements of people hunting them and them being the bad guys and us trying to conquer whatever they're doing, right? So that's a lot of what's in urban fantasy. But for me, when I think about it, it's the main two elements is that the urban and the contemporary. And I guess there could be historical urban fantasy. I mean, a lot of the vampire fantasies are set in, London in the 1800s or
Well,
1900s,
sure, the
and
whole
those could
Gaslamp
be considered
fantasy
right.
thing
And so,
is yeah.
yeah. And then, well, would steampunk fantasy be, or, if it's set in an urban setting that, but I think now we're talking about urban and contemporary. So,
It could very well be that this is just a thing to be able to know where to put the book on a shelf. That you're writing a book and then you go, well, what is this? Like what is it that Highlander, I don't know if embarrassed to say or not. I wrote the first Highlander novel back in a billion years ago, and that's urban fantasy if anything, because it's a bunch of immortal people who fight with swords in Central Park. I mean, it's there's there's nothing else that I could call it. I don't think we thought to call it that back in the 90s, but but yeah. Mark, did you have anything that you'd want to add to this question?
Um, yeah, and again, as I was saying, I sort of have a double approach to this or double perspective, but I think what unites them both is that whether I've been writing in nonfiction or fiction, my books have tended to kind of straddle a gap, and that can be a positive because it might be something that nobody else has written about yet, and it might be kind of quirky.
Mm.
But on the other hand, it can also make it hard for booksellers or promoters to figure out how to market it. So I'll give you an example from both my nonfiction and fiction. So with my book Covered Love, the one that was just the third edition just came out. It when it was nominated for a Julia Child Award, it was actually in the technical reference category, which it isn't really. Not at all. Um, and at the same time, it was also nominated for a humor award. In Canada, there's a famous long dead humorist named Stephen Leacock, and so it was nominated for a humor award. And yet, it was also a technical reference book, apparently. Um, so, as I say, sometimes that made it difficult, but I think for the most part, it came across as quirky enough that certainly media back then, and again, this is 30 years ago when it came out, were very, very interested in it. It seemed like it was pretty easy to get newspaper and radio promotion of it. Now, with my novel, The Headmasters, my young adult novel, it's dystopian, and even that is kind of strange or interesting, I think, because it seems to me that most people think of dystopian as a kind of subcategory of science fiction.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I think that most dystopian things I've read do not have any science in them. You know, they are worlds where technology has gone away. So maybe it's just more a subgenre of speculative fiction. But the way that I think my novel, The Headmasters, kind of straddles the gaps is it takes the conventions of the usual dystopian kind of novel, but then I play with the form quite a bit. Like it's in literary creative ways, different voices, different perspectives, different fonts and things like that. Um, and so that I think risks alienating some publishers or readers or that kind of book, where where it's both commercial and literary at the same time. That can be hard to market. But I'm very glad that I landed with Shadowpaw Press because I think they could see what I was trying to do with the book. Yeah, so that's what I have to say, straddling the gaps.
Here's something I'm curious about. So, I two questions come to mind, but the first one is, we used to say that all of your systems in a science fiction or a fantasy book needs to have rivets. In other words, you must all of your magic needs to make sense. It needs to have rules. The rules need to be communicated to the author. But I, I'm I believe in rules, but I'm also allergic to them. Like sometimes I think you break them. Do you guys think about that stuff when you're writing your books? I've established that the magic in this world works such a way, and so I need to make sure that there's a character in here who explains it, and I need to make sure not to break it. Whereas I remember the guy that Bill Moyer interviewed. Anyway, there was the phrase concretizing the myth. The more you explain something, the more you take the magic out of it. It's good to say Superman is strong because of the yellow sun, but it starts to lose its magic when you start to explain how a yellow sun might actually affect the DNA of an alien. Suddenly you're off in something that's not as interesting.
Yeah.
So, and having said that, actually, you could make it interesting. But do you think about this stuff, like making sure that your magic has rivets?
Well, I think if I can jump in, I think with regard to speculative science fiction, dystopian, urban fantasy, um, what matters with the story is that it has internal coherence.
Mm.
And if it violates that, then readers will feel that. So um, I'm thinking today I was talking with a friend about the French playwright Molière from the 17th century, and I don't like his plays because the first 90% is really interesting, and then consistently what he does is he literally has a Deus ex machina come down and solve everything. It's like, well, where did that come from? It feels like you're breaking the rules or the walls in some way.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think that it's got to have internal coherence, and that can be a range of things. So like on the one hand, like I think like hard science fiction, such as The Martian, I think where everything is explained. It could actually be like that. And on the other end, I would say the kind of science fiction that tends more towards like the mythic. So again, there's still internal coherence, but it's not explained how this person, Superman, Zeus, Batman, Frankenstein, how they get their powers or unique abilities. It's just a given, a donné.
Well, actually, Stephen King, to your point, in his On Writing, talks about the real question. No, it wasn't On Writing, it was Misery. He talks about writing a romance novel, and he says if you're going to do a twist, the twist has to work. It doesn't have to necessarily actually work in real life, but it has to at least work enough that the reader goes, ah, how satisfying. That's
Yeah,
cool. You know,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Don or Tricia, did you want to?
Yeah, well, I mean, and as you know, both of my books revolve around gems that actually have captured a portion of their owner's souls. They've
Yeah.
encapsulated, and one can argue the feasibility of that in scientific terms. But I wasn't trying to hold myself to that rule consciously, but I certainly was very much aware that anything I was talking about. I wanted it to be within the realm, some sort of reasonable realm of believability. So when Barbara goes to find this chain that's unbreakable, and Mrs. Harlow starts talking about these heavy metals. I mean, I actually did some research, and these amazing metals are out there. Many of them are almost conceptual.
Mhm.
But in this case, because of her remarkable capacity, she's able to take these sort of almost imaginary metals and craft them into this amazing chain, which is unbreakable. So I enjoy doing that, saying, yeah, let's we're going to do this, but we're going to do it within some sort of vague realm of possibility. So people are reading and say, wow, look at that. And the same thing with the transmission. We find out the transmission from the Mester's Central stone to the gym owner's stone. Again, I was fascinated by the whole wave concept, the transmission of waves, frequencies. This is insane. And so, I mean, what I found much to my amazement that this transmission of ideas, suggestions from half a world away wasn't nearly as abstract and unbelievable as I thought it was. So,
Right.
I was able to build on that, and I think keep it not, I mean, not in the immediate realm of possibility. But certainly in the I mean, let's face it, fantasy and fantastic come from the same root. So I mean, at least it's fantastic, it's fantasy, but it's still kind of within the realm of the, well, that's kind of the idea, isn't it, of urban fantasy, within the realm of the known universe.
Mhm.
That's wonderful. Tricia, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, so I agree with Mark. It definitely has to be internally coherent. So you have to follow your own rules. I don't really think, and what was coming up for me was this show versus tell. Like, I don't think that readers necessarily like want a huge dump at the beginning of A through Z. These are all the rules of the world and the magic.
You can be stronger than that. I actually think they don't. They actively do not want that.
Right. My all my books are written in first person, so I really like the reader to find out as the main character finds out what's going on, how the world is built, how the magic works. And I look back at some of my earlier books and I'm like, oh, I wish I'd done that a little bit differently because I kind of did dump a little bit there. Yeah, and some of that might just be reader preference too. I mean, every reader is going to experience something differently, but I have come in my series, I don't like write all 5 books in the beginning and then make sure they all match each other. I have a huge document of what I've done, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to break that rule. Is there a way I can get around the rule that I already wrote? And
Right.
usually I can figure out somehow to work my way around the rule so that the reader won't go, no, you can't do that. So, and so the other thing that came up for me, we were talking about urban fantasy, and Don's talking about, what's just beyond the realm of comprehension or truth, or, what's the term is magical realism, probably for a lot of
Mm.
people. Urban fantasy could be much like that. It's just, just beyond the realm of what we can touch or see, or in a physical, logical way, right?
Well, and if you're absolutely right that it's almost it's an arbitrary distinction sometimes between magical realism and urban fantasy, and uh, but I believe that what you just said, in fact, is a really wonderful opportunity when Tricia, you've set up your rules and then you go, how do I break it? And you come up with a cool way to break it. The audience is delighted because you set up that there's a hat and the hat has a bottom and there's no rabbit in it, and then you pull the rabbit out of the hat and they're excited, forgetting momentarily that you invented the hat. There is no hat, there is no rabbit, but they believed it, and in their hearts they were surprised, and I think that's great. So yeah, and I really, I'm going to take to the grave what Mark said about the whole thing about the coherence. Even though the audience won't necessarily feel like articulating that, they will feel it, and they will reward those who stick to it. Um,
And can I
so
add something to just
yeah,
something further? I'm thinking a bunch of things, but what one is, I think the most audiences are willing also to stretch what they will accept. An example that comes to mind is, remember, some years ago there was a movie called Batman versus Superman, or Superman versus Batman. This
sure.
big battle, they were enemies. Well, come on, like realistically, he's Superman versus Batman. Who's going to win? Or another example is with Captain America, he's got this shield. And for me, it weakened it when they started to try to explain where this shield came from and what it was made. I mean, they literally said it's a metal called unobtainium, you know.
That is
And
funny. That's
yeah,
just
it
funny
weakens
to
it,
the audience.
I
Yes,
think.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. And also Black Mirror. I love the series Black Mirror because it's like now, but maybe 5, 6, 11 years in the future, and it really kind of explores um, some of the things that are on the horizon for us, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And they shy away from magic per se
Yeah.
in Black Mirror, but it is deeply speculative, and some of the technology they're using is so perfect that it's almost
Hmm.
and really in the end it doesn't matter because they're playing with moral themes.
Yeah.
So really, you're into the story and you just go, all right, let us all agree that this particular technology works, and now let's play with the moral questions involved, and usually have a sucky ending, because it never works out except for in one that I can think of.
Mm.
Uh, Okay, so I want to shift over, if you don't mind, and you're welcome to walk us through. I want you to keep talking about your own books, but I'm really interested in your process. Like, so you can talk about new stuff you're working on. It doesn't matter, whatever you like. Although Mickey will probably prefer that you make sure and talk about the one that you're currently on top of.
No,
But
no, we
uh,
promote everything.
but
It's
I
good.
want to know about process, like do you find that you outline the heck out of stuff, or do you just go by dead reckoning? Do you, Lee Child, the writer of the Reacher novels, says that he basically lays on a couch and thinks of sort of the first few chapters of the book and starts writing that, and then just goes wherever he goes. I don't know if I even believe that, but and Stephen King also famously says he doesn't plan his novels. I do actually believe that, but I think that in his mind there's a muscle up here that knows when he's turning into the third act in a play sense. I know when he knows when he's headed towards the ending. But talk about your process, outlines. Do you get up at work at 5 and work on it at 5 in the morning, same time every day? Um, so give me the high level bullets of your process. Don, we'll start with you. Um, you got a book to write. It's due whenever it's due. Um, uh, how do you mechanically get about doing it?
Yeah, I mean, before I get to the immediacy of it, I mean, like I say, I'm well retired now, and I've been writing. My first book was published in 1974 or five, so I've been at this for a long time. But I've always been, as I mentioned, fortunately, elsewhere employed. So grabbing time to write was always a challenge for me. So some of the books I was writing was literally one of the young adult novels I was writing after I put my kids to bed and
Mm,
read them a bedtime story, drew them a lunch bag cartoon for the next day, and then got up and so at that point it's 9:30 or 10. I managed to get in 2 hours before I had to go to sleep because I had to get up the next morning at 8 to go teach,
mm,
and so that was that was challenging, and so I learned to at that point I learned to use the time that I had wisely, I think. But as far as the specifics, like when I used to go into this, talking about the old days, I mean, my first book that I wrote, Tomorrow is School, I actually wrote it out longhand. I mean,
mm,
those were the days. And I could actually go into a classroom and show the transition from some scratched out outline, to a written first draft, to a typed draft, and so forth. And I think in many ways, I still utilize that. I just thought, this might be kind of fun. I mean, as I say, I'm trying to work on the third book right now. And this is kind of what this background's not going
oh, it won't let you. It won't
it's not
let you
going to let me
because
do
you've
it.
got a backdrop.
Okay, it's too bad because you can see you can just see these lines and sort of arrows and things jotted down here and there. And then the other thing I tend to do is that I tend to write kind of sections like sketches. Like here's a sketch, maybe two or three paragraphs that might or might not find itself into the book, but it kind of clarifies my thinking.
Mm,
Both with the books, both of them. I actually, for some of the main characters, I sat down and wrote character sketches for them. I wanted to know who they were. I wanted to know their backgrounds. I wanted to know their values, their beliefs, their frustrations, their aspirations, their conflicts. Not so much because it was going to be included word for word in the actual text, but because I wanted them to be distinct characters, distinct voices, distinct personalities, and so when they encounter a situation or a person, that personality, I knew who that person was. I knew who he or was. I knew how he or she would respond to that situation because I knew, how they thought, how they worked. So that was really helpful to me to be going into the writing already having these characters in mind. I
mhm,
wasn't quite sure what they were going to be doing, but as these things occurred, I was able, I think, to make them respond in a consistent way and a believable way. And one of the things I've always prided myself in is having distinct voices and distinct characters. I think some of the stuff you read, boy, you say, now wait a minute, who said that? The
yeah.
voice is the same, the situation's the same. It's like, so yeah, after a while, it's kind of be one big, But so yeah, I mean, I definitely start off with some kind of a vague outline, but I can also sort of relate to that idea. At some point, you just have to write.
Mm,
Um, like we used to talk about the tyranny of the blank page. Now it's the tyranny of the blank screen. But
Yeah.
I mean, at some point you just have to say, "Oh my God, all right, here we go." And because I mean, as a writer, particularly writing the kind of things that we're writing, this is a commitment of time and energy.
Oh,
It's like, oh geez, all right, well, let's get on with it then. So, but yeah, like I say, it's been really fun for me on this one. Like I said, I'm actually mixing in some interesting research I'm doing on the Nazi occupation of Budapest during World War II, which is fascinating. And they were one of the last. Hitler ordered them not to surrender, and they were one of the last outposts
mm,
of the Nazi in Budapest, of course, itself has been overrun. So doing that research on Budapest to be able to bring it's a character too, and to bring the sense of place and the sense of history to it, that. So I guess what I'm saying is that a lot of what I do, not a lot, but much of what I do is research. And the
mm,
other thing is, of course, you draw on your own experience. I spent some time in Budapest and it stuck with me. And so when I'm writing about a ruin bar in the heart of Budapest, I've been there, and so I'm able to, I think, hopefully, really create a believable scene where the Mester operates in Smithfield Market in London is that interesting place. It's the meat market of London. And so, what an appropriate place for this guy who may or may not be human,
mm.
to run this scurrilous operation. So yeah, I mean, but to think those characters through, to work them through, and to be ready to have them in the back of your mind. And so when this occurs, you know how Barbara's going to react. You know what Zoltan's going to say, how he's going to feel. Yeah, I do a lot of that, and I enjoy it.
If one of you guys though, uh, when it comes to actually the see, because it seems to me you could do that for a year and not get the book
It's
written.
true.
And so like when it comes time, you're like, holy mackerel, I got 3 months to get this book done.
Yeah, I know.
Like, do you say, I need to do 1,000 words a week. I need to do 2,000 words a week. Do you even think that way? Like, by the way, I think that way. Like that is how I work. I say I need to get 4,000 words done a week, or there's no way I can get this book done.
You
But
must have such a day.
are you guys that kind of
Tricia's a genius at this. She writes a book a week. I mean, I don't know how she does it, but she does. I'd like to hear about that.
Tricia? Is that true?
No, that is a gross overestimation. I have written a book in a month, but not a week.
Oh, well then.
Yeah, sorry. Um, Yeah, like Dawn, I don't do a ton of outlining. I have I know the beginning, I know the end, I know some major plot points, I know, my characters, my antagonist, and if I wrote a outline, like a detailed outline, I would not even write the book because I
Really?
would be so bored with myself. I don't want to know what I'm gonna write.
Wow.
So I usually write like an hour or two a day when I'm working on a novel, and I set deadlines for myself with my editor. So I know the deadline, I know how much I need to do. But if I'm writing every day consistently, it just flows better. If I'm not writing and I'm doing my day job, then in between those little breaks, or if I go on a walk or I'm driving my car, I'm constantly thinking, okay, this is where my characters are. Where are they going to go next? What is their next um, what is their next challenge? What is the antagonist going to do next? I'm constantly thinking about the characters and what I just wrote. Was that right? Was it true? Does it lead up to where I want to go? And what I'm going to write next. So my whole brain is basically occupied by that book for a month to 3 to 6 months at a time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And Jason, I'll just add in there, that's not even including all the stuff that her publicist is getting her as well. So
Right.
there's on top of all that, beyond everything else she's doing, she's also doing interviews, she's writing guest posts, she's doing written interviews, like all these guys are.
Yeah.
So that's part of this as well. It's all work.
Well, we should
Yeah.
feel free to throw anything in, anybody, as far as process. But in fact, let's switch over to that. The reality in of being a writer today with a publisher. I've discovered this on the writer side because I still write books. And on the publisher side is that the writer is now responsible for so much of the publicity and the marketing and the social networking and all this stuff that when I started 30 years ago didn't exist. Uh, and there are pluses and minuses to that because there's also more opportunities to get your voice out there than there used to be, publicity wise. But Mickey, why don't you start us off talking a little bit about, for the listener, if you're a novelist today, how much of that job involves all the stuff you were just talking about? There's the writing of the book, but there's all this other hat that you have to wear.
Well, there's two trains of thought of that. Thanks for leveraging me in. There's two trains of thought around this, is that individuals who are indie published or self-published, the onus is on them to market those books. If the books don't get marketed in any way, shape, or form, they're not going to sell. And so as a self-published author, it's 10 times harder from that aspect. But also authors who are published, not just with small press, with the big five as well.
Oh yeah.
If you're a mid-lister within those outlets, or even sometimes a multiple New York Times bestseller, they still don't get the attention that they deserve from their publisher from that aspect. Timelines, you're looking 3 to 6 months tops marketability on a new release. That doesn't include the trade paperback. That doesn't include the audiobook. That doesn't include anything beyond that. That doesn't include marketability of your backlist. And even in the marketability from those publishers, it sometimes doesn't even include mainstream magazine, newspaper, radio interviews. It includes a lot of social media blasts and tagging and getting trade editorial reviews, but nothing else. And after the 6-month mark, you're pretty much done. So if you haven't got someone like myself, you're in charge of doing all of that. Whether you're published with a small press, a large press, or on your own, these are the escapades and these are the roadblocks that authors face today. And everybody faces it because there's a million books being published, and there's so much competition within every genre, fantasy, horror, whatever. Like there's so much competition overall. So am I popular? Yeah, I'm popular. Do I have lots of interviews who want to sign with me? Every week. I had one today. And these are all the reasons behind that. That's my take.
Don, did you want to throw
I just want to say
something?
one small correction. There's actually 4 million books published last year. You're gonna have to, I mean,
Oh my goodness.
no, I mean, it's just overwhelming. It really is. And the other point you made, Jason, and I thought, you said, well, 30 years ago when I started, well, 50 years ago when I started. I mean, this stuff literally wasn't there. I mean, literally, we didn't have podcasts. I mean, you got your book reviewed in the Globe and Mail, and off you went.
Yeah.
And I had no idea, for example, that to be reviewed in the Library Journal, you had to pay to do that.
Not the Library Journal, but others, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay,
That's okay.
I didn't mean to demean the Library
No,
Journal.
no.
Kirkus
But
Review. Okay, Kirkus Review.
but you're right, Don. And I mean, sorry to interject. I just want to make this point because it's on my mind. The industry's changing. Like in the last 2 months, here are 2 examples. The Chicago Sun-Times laid off 20% of their staff. They canceled their culture articles editorial section completely.
Goodness.
Stingray TV in the city I live in shut their doors last week.
Wow.
The staff found out by a press release posted on their website. They were not even told it was happening. They were just told the next day, you don't have a job.
Yeah.
And these are all major traditional media places. Stingray TV is an affiliate of CTV. So these are all major editorial places. So what Don's referencing, I'll get back to you in a second, Don. Sorry I cut you off. But what I'm trying to say is what Don's referencing with the Globe and Mail 20 years ago, that doesn't happen now because there are major sites that are shutting down and closing shop. So yeah, it's scary in some ways.
Can I jump in here? And I certainly think it has changed in the past 20 or 30 years. I think too that Again, having published both nonfiction and fiction books, my experience has been, and others have told me this, that and Mickey, you in particular can tell me if I'm correct or wrong about this, but my experience has been that marketing nonfiction books has been easier because you can say to somebody, this is what the book is about. You can say that in 60 words. Trying to do that with a novel, it's a little harder. So with my nonfiction books, we and it was with the first edition was with a small publisher in Manitoba, but they were able to get reviewed in The Atlantic and The Economist. There was a front page story on the Toronto Star. I mean, there had never been a book reviewed on the front page of the Toronto Star, but because it was this kooky nonfiction book, I think that's what happened. Um, yeah, I was going to say something else, but I'm old and it's
No,
late.
no, no. Well, there's so much going on, right? And by the way, you're totally right. It is a little easier to pitch a news person or a columnist or a blogger a nonfiction thing because somehow it's just easier to hang your hat on.
Yeah.
Having said that, uh, there's all of this stuff that you guys are still you're beholden to do, right? With social media and what have you, because if you have any chance of people noticing and talking about something, I have noticed, by the way, that we sell more books if somebody posts about it on Instagram than anything else.
Hmm.
Ads are good, but Instagram posts for somebody are better, and it is really hard to get social media stuff. Tricia, what is your experience of the publicity hat that you have to wear?
I do a lot of outreach. So I started, like you, I started my podcast because of 2020. My podcast is Finding the Magic Book Podcast. And I just wanted to connect with my fellow authors and readers because I was missing all the conferences that I went to. And I
Yeah.
thought, hey, I can interview my author friend, talk to them, catch up with them. Plus, have everybody learn about both of our books. So
Yeah.
that's why I started my podcast. I really love doing it. Really love talking to authors, but I probably do like five a week. So that's like 45 minutes to an hour of my time every week. And now I'm releasing two a week. So I'm like booked through August. It's really fun, but I have like all the way from, I have a girl who's 14 who's now published two novels and I interview her, but I also have Penguin Random House sending me emails for their A-list authors who want to be on my podcast. So I have everyone, which is interesting and fun.
I,
Thank you for the support, Tricia. Thank you for the support.
I just want to say that's a wonderful. I love that. I love listening to podcasts about authors, and it is a really great way of. God, it sounds so crass to say getting the word out, but getting yourself into the conversation, and but it does after a while become a job. It's part of your job. It's like, okay, what are we doing this week? What do I have to read tonight because I'm interviewing this guy tomorrow, and it can be really hard. Um,
Jason, I just wanted to kick in here for a minute. I mean, yeah, I mean, this is something I was utterly unprepared for. I mean, like, my publishing has been primarily in Canada, and not that much over the last few years. But the thing that I found, I've had, yeah, two Canadian bestsellers that sold like between, around 20,000 copies, which isn't huge in an American market, but it's pretty good in a Canadian
no, it's
market.
really good. Let me tell you, I would be delighted. That is really good. Yes.
So, but anyway, the thing about it is both of those came out from small presses. And in the case of Where the Rivers Meet, which is a young adult novel with an Aboriginal character as the lead, it was published by a Métis publishing house in Manitoba, in Winnipeg, and they had a built-in clientele. It went into classrooms. It went into primarily Aboriginal classrooms across the country. It was really well received. And that's the other thing. I think finding the niche, like the same thing with Tomorrow is School, much to my surprise, it was picked up by teacher training programs across the
Mm.
country, and they were using it in universities. And so there again, there's another 2 or 3 thousand a year. It's like, and so, when you're trying to kind of nibble around the edges, gee, maybe I can sell 10 with this podcast, or it's particularly challenging.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the size of the publisher is the determining factor. I think, obviously they have more money oftentimes, not always, more resources to put into it. But certainly I think it's the um, it's the connections that the publisher has. It's the nature of the book that you've written. Who is the appeal? A friend of mine's a poet, and I'm talking about I have a hard living. Tom Wayman is one of Canada's best known poets, and he makes something like 50% of his royalties from one poem he wrote, called "Did I Miss Anything?" That's been anthologized all across North America. And that's one poem, and yet he's written probably 14 books. So I mean, so again, it's a funny business. It's a funny business.
Yeah, if you had written "This is just a say," which is like 5 lines long, you would be on talk
Yeah.
shows for the rest of your life. Isn't that wild?
Well, and to Mark's, like the point that you, Jason, you and Mark made around the media wanting nonfiction books rather than the fiction aspect, specifically science fiction and fantasy, guys. The reason that happens is usually, and I'm talking from a self-publishing standpoint, the self-published nonfiction books are usually self-published by experts in those fields.
Mm.
So automatically there's legitimacy there.
Yep.
When you're looking at fiction-based books, i.e. fantasy, horror, and science fiction, the amount of self-published books in that area quadruples. And the distance around that is only about 20 to 30%. And of course, I represent some of them. Many of them are on this stage right now. Will actually do a really good job of making sure that the product is properly edited, having decent book covers, and taking the brand seriously. The other 70%, they're putting out a book a week, expecting to just sell. So how can it be deemed quality? And when the media sees that, how can the media see or think that it's quality?
And how can they get through it to begin with? Like
That's
even in
the
the best.
reason. That's the key reason that happens.
Mm.
Honestly.
Wow, that's really good.
I mean, I'm all for democratic publishing and all that, but let's face it, 40 or 50 years ago, to have a book accepted by a publisher was a big deal. And I mean, it was a gatekeeper.
That's
You
true.
know, there's a certain threshold of quality. I mean, that could be argued and has been, but there was a certain expectation of quality that's not there anymore. I mean, 2/3 of the books published out of those 4 million were self-published. My guess is that well over half of those never had an editor look at it.
Mm.
So I mean, the whole publishing world has just turned on its head just since I've been working in it.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of newspapers today will not look at a self-published book unless those self-published authors are represented. And I'm not saying this to build myself up, it's true. Unless those self-published authors have a publicist behind their works. Because in their minds, then they see if you have a publicist, then you're obviously doing something right, that publicist wants to work with your self-published book. It's true. 100% true.
One thing that I think has been really, really good in terms of what's happened in publishing lately, and not just publishing, podcasting, any form of getting ideas and information and conversation out, is that there can be very narrow audiences, and yet those narrow audiences can be quite numerous. So I think, if it weren't for, I don't know, this isn't quite true, but I'm still going to use it as an example. Let's say books about young people growing up queer or something like that, that there is an audience there that I think if it weren't for micro publishing and small publishers, it would be very, very difficult to get those stories out there. And I think it's really, really great that stories belonging to almost anyone, not just individuals, but people who belong to a self-identified community,
Yeah.
Are able to connect with one another.
100%.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. And it's also that self-publishing enables that. And also, not to toot our horn, but but independent publishing enables that. You know,
Hmm.
I'm actively always looking for books from LGBTQ and other marginalized communities. And I know that sometimes it's feast or famine. Sometimes there's a lot of those books getting bought by the major publishers. Sometimes they take a turn away. Oh, we're not selling so many of those this year. You know, a smaller publisher has less resources, but more ability to just say, well, I wanna because I like them, you know, whatever. Yes, Tricia, did you want to? I want to make sure that I gave everybody opportunity to talk about the difficulties of this. Um, but if not, I want to get over to paying attention to our time, where you can be found, and what titles you want people to look for. So let's start with Tricia. Where can you be found, and what should people look for?
All right, so my website is triciacopeland.com. My Realm Chronicles series, the finale is coming out in July. So the finale is To Be a Fae, but the first book in the series is To Be a Fae Queen. So that's the best one to start with. And if you go to my website, you can get a free intro to that series with Titania Rises when you sign up for my newsletter.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mr. Morton, what about you?
Well, I guess I would mention two places. One would be my publisher's website. The publisher is Shadowpaw Press. That's one word, and Shadowpaw is the name of his cat, or one of his cats. So shadowpawpress.com. You can see a couple of my books there that they have published, as well as a host of a whole bunch of other authors. My own personal website is markmorton.ca, CA because I'm in Canada, not well. I'm so far still in Canada. We'll see what happens in the next.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Don, what about you?
Yes, well, I just happen to have a new book out. Thank you very much for asking, Jason.
Today, no less. Yes.
And uh, well, now we're hoping. I mean, we're having the physical launch at a local cafe on Sunday. Now the books are in transit, and as you know, the Canadian-American borders have been somewhat fraught lately. So it could be a really disappointing launch, but I'm hoping for the best.
I
But yeah,
have to.
that I mean, I'm really, really pleased to have the two books out now. It completes that cycle, and I'm delighted to have those. I also, interestingly enough, am having kind of the situation that Mark is talking about. A young adult book I wrote called Running, which I'm quite proud of, which uses a multi-ethnic setting, is been picked up by Timken, my old publisher, and is being released in a new edition, and that's going to be coming out in the next month or two, and I'm really excited about that. I still have about, I don't know, 10 or 12 titles in print. All of them are available through my webpage, which is donsawyer.org, much like I copied Tricia. Um, and uh, and then, of course, for the wonderful um, the 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 Soul Catcher series, which is published by a fabulous publishing house called Castlebridge Media. You can go to their website, and of course, as somebody once said, or you can go to your favorite online bookseller. And sadly, that's where 50% of books are being bought these days.
Something close
So
to the 90, I think. But still, yes. Yes. Thank
yeah,
you very, very much. And Mr. Mickelson,
Yes.
you know, for those who want to know more about publicity, if people are if that's where they are in their publishing journey, where can they find you?
Creative Edge Publicity is my website. It's my company name. My website link is www.creativeedge-services. You will see all my clients on the first page there. All three of these guys are on that page, so thank you all for this. Today was very gratifying for me. I get to share some time with three of the wonderful people I work with. So that's where you can find me, and that's what I do.
Thank you very much. And you can find us at Castlebridge Media. I am honored to have gotten a chance to spend time with you guys and listen to your wisdom and your thoughts. And I want to do everything I can to make the world more accessible for your books. So thank you very much. And I will make sure that this is up on YouTube and on the podcast. And of course, I'll make sure that all of you guys know where to find it. Um, I hope you have a fantastic evening, and thank you for spending the evening with me. Congratulations, Don. Happy book birthday.
Oh,
And
gosh, thanks very much.
Yay.
Before we're
Don.
done, though, Jason, I just want to say we were talking about how difficult it often is to work with like you absolutely true. You send a manuscript off, and you hear maybe, if you're lucky, 6 months later. You have been the most responsive publisher I have ever worked with. If I send you an email, I'll get a response back within 24 hours. That means a lot to writers, to be able to process. And I really want to thank you for that. And for this too, by the way, for
Yeah.
hosting this, really great conversation. It'd be nice to have more of these.
I thank you very much. I appreciate that. We should have more of these, and I thank you. That means a lot to me. All right, guys, have a lovely evening. For those of us in Colorado, the rain is coming, and it's going to be great. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Everyone, bye-bye.
Bye.